In Missoula, we are celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day. However, Indigenous Peoples Day is still not a federally recognized holiday. So I dove a little bit deeper into the history of how Indigenous Peoples Day started. As an Indigenous person in America, I often wondered who Christopher Columbus was. It wasn't until I was older I learned the true history of Christopher Columbus. So who really was he? I spoke with David Beck, a history professor from the University of Illinois, to learn more about why America celebrates him.
From a perspective of the indigenous people, he's a symbol of the beginning of genocide.
Christopher Columbus has often been widely celebrated as the discoverer of America, despite indigenous tribes already calling this land home. When Columbus landed in what is now the United States, he began to take over the land and the people.
He kidnapped more people than he was able to fit on his ships, and so he put them to work as slaves in mines. He hunted down the women for sport and the men for sport. He murdered them. He fed them to dogs.
Columbus Day became a federally recognized holiday in the 1800s, but centuries later, indigenous people would start to push back, calling it a disgraceful holiday. Shane Morgel, a CSKT tribal member, has been working to establish Indigenous Peoples Day and to educate Montanans about the true impact of Columbus.
We set out initially to, and I've carried bills several times to try and replace Columbus Day, and we haven't had any luck doing that, really because we set out to do that because the person that Columbus is really, to us, it's a demeaning holiday to a lot of Indigenous people to hear.
Morgel says he's now proposing legislation to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day on Columbus Day. The choice of what holiday to honor will then be left up to the greater population.
What I myself and so many others really want people to take away from Indigenous Peoples Day is just a learning opportunity, the opportunity to learn about true and accurate history, to learn about your neighbors, your family, yourself. To come together and learn about different cultures. And we really take that serious when we say we want it to be a day that represents everybody and pulls everyone together and unifies us.
Celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day may look different for everyone. Even if you are not Indigenous, there are still ways to get involved. One way is to study the history like Professor Beck.
But I think it's important to think about the way that holiday impacts Indigenous communities and the way Indigenous people think about that. I mean, it's really a holiday that honors the beginning of the genocide that's been so hurtful to Indigenous people.
Approximately 24 states do not celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, but it is still widely adopted across the country, and Indigenous people hope for it to become federally recognized. In Missoula, I'm Robin Iron, MTN News.